This podcast is brought to you by Dan Ads. This is Ari Paparo. Did you miss out on the incredible Dan Ads Summit in New York? The event brought together over 180 ad tech experts to tackle the biggest challenges and opportunities facing our industry today. I had the honor of kicking off the day with a keynote presentation on the current state of the advertising landscape. Want to hear my insights and predictions for the future? You're in luck. Recordings from the Dan Ads Summits are being released, and you can catch my keynote right now. Head over to the Dan Ads website at danads.com and find it under webinars. Another exciting news, Dan Ads is already planning their next summit. If you'd like to sponsor the event or even be a speaker, registrations are now open. So check it out at danads.com.
Welcome to the AdTech God Pod, your window into the world of advertising technology and the people behind it. I'm your host, AdTech God. Welcome to the AdTech God Pod, your go-to for conversations with visionary agency leaders shaping the future of our industry. Today, we're joined by Sam Bloom, Head of Partnerships at PMG, an agency partnering with powerhouse brands like Nike, Whole Foods, Intuit, Experian, Ralph Lauren, and many, many more. Sam is no stranger to driving innovation and growth. He's spearheaded transformative strategies as CEO of Camelot Strategic Marketing and Media, and played a key role in its acquisition by PMG in October of 2023. Sam, I'm happy to have you here. Welcome to the AdTech God Pod.
Super happy to be here, ATG.
Thank you. I've heard you speak. I've seen you at events. I love what you've done. You're obviously a name in the industry that I respect greatly. So thank you for taking time out of your day to be here.
Are you kidding? Anytime I get a chance to talk to a god, it's a good day.
You know, hashtag blessed, Sam. I wanted to ask, most of my guests work in ad tech or they work on the publisher side. You work on the agency side. I would love to hear about how you got into advertising and what brought you to, where you're at today at PMG.
Well, so we do have a long, I would say, me personally and Camelot as well as PMG have a long history in ad tech. And there's some good stories around this. But I think the first thing I should say is I'm a third generation advertiser. My grandfather had started an agency which my father ran, and he sold it to a French company who then sold it to another French company called Publicis. And so my father was actually chairman of Publicis. I literally grew up, in the advertising business. And so when I came out of college, it was the last thing I wanted to do. But, when you grow up in an advertising family, everything's an ad. And so the long story short is I was an English major. I eventually wound up in consulting. I went to what was in Anderson Consulting and went on the technical side. And it was during the first .com boom. And I was based in Silicon Valley working out of, Anderson's kind of headquarter office. And I was like, what am I doing? I was like, I need to go be at a startup. So I came back to Dallas where I was, born and bred, found a startup here called AudioNet, which has now become broadcast.com. Everyone knows it as Mark Cuban's company. And I worked there for 3.5 years. And then, went on to another startup that failed very miserably. And then eventually wound up at Blockbuster, where I started Blockbuster's online business to compete against Netflix. And then was ultimately traded to the agency. In the process, when I was at Blockbuster, I met two important folks. I met Josh Koppelman and Chris Freilich. They had sold half.com to eBay. And when I was at Blockbuster, we were looking at doing a deal with eBay. And so fast forward, those guys started a VC firm. And I went into the agency business. And one day, and lo and behold, I got a phone call from Freilich who said, hey, I've got these two kids from UPenn that want to build an E-Trade platform for media. Can I send them down to meet with you? And he said, I think they could learn a lot. And so he sent down Nat Turner and Zach Weinberg, who are the founders of Invite Media. And we literally built out the interface of Invite Media in our office. It was funny, when they came, our receptionist thought they were the interns. And that kind of began a long history with the venture capital community, where those early stage ad tech investors would send folks to Dallas. And by the way, it was funny. The first deal, when Invite was successful, Terry did the deal. We were a reference in the deal. And then, along came Demdex and, it's just sort of steamrolled. And we were I kind of laugh about it because we were sort of like what I think of like Berkshire Hathaway being, in Nebraska, in Omaha. Dallas is not exactly the center of ad tech, but Camelot had a reputation of being open to new ideas, being pretty technical, having clients willing to, test things out and, willing to, break some shit. And so that's sort of my history. And so since then, we've been very involved in there's a lot of first, best, only things we've done over the years. We just never publicized it. We've done a lot in the CTV world. And some of it was just frankly, meeting good people with good ideas that applied to clients. And our business model is such that we don't mark up media or take a principled interest. And so our interest is very pure. So I think that's why we've been, early on in a lot of these things. Innovation was really our goal. And also client outcomes was a goal. And so we got very lucky in all of this stuff. And I wish I could tell you it was some kind of genius. It's not. It's just being right place, right time.
Right place, right time, right pricing model, honesty. Being transparent with your clients is key. I think that's a big issue with some of the agencies is the transparency. It's obviously something that comes up in the ad tech world too. And I think that's key, like being able to deliver value to your clients and at the same time help them understand where every dollar is going is really a winning strategy. I don't understand why anyone doesn't do that.
Well, look, the incentives in the industry are terrible at the moment. And I think they're, potentially will only get worse as, certainly as tech evolves and margins get, eroded. I think it's a real challenge. But look, at the end of the day, the way I've always viewed this is I got to be able to look myself in the mirror and know that I'm doing the best for the client and I can be straightforward about it. And that, and I think there's a lot of folks in this industry that are walking around doing things that I think over time they'll regret, because they're either shady or not in, the client's best interest. And I think at the end of the day, I don't judge it by anybody else's standards. I judge it by my own. And that, and I think that's how I, prefer to view it. And I think PMG feels very strongly about this too. A lot of decisions get made because of, bad financial incentives.
How do you feel? You had mentioned that you're third generation advertising. How do you think that that's helped you build what you've built at Camelot and obviously now as part of PMG? How has that changed your mentality? Because knowing, my background from an entrepreneurship father and a grandfather, I always had this inkling in the back of my head. I wanted to do something on my own, but I didn't know what, and nothing ever clicked. How did your kind of history and your family history help you decide how you're going to scale Camelot, work with these clients, and build out your business?
Well, so let me give you one piece of background on Camelot. So I actually didn't start Camelot. So Camelot, the founder of Camelot was a guy named Tom Callahar, and he and his wife, Brenda Worst, started the agency. At Blockbuster, I ran investments. So I was a business development guy. And so I did investments in venture and that kind of stuff, as well as help incubate kind of our DVD by mail service. Well, one of the things I learned early on in that was that, when you do deals, it's very hit or miss in that kind of world. And I wanted to learn a trade. And so when I think about advertising, it's a trade. And so when I first met Tom, the founder of Camelot, Tom helped me realize that, yes, it's a trade, but the higher calling in our business is marketing. That's ultimately what we're trying to do, is to help clients market. And so, that's where I'd say I differ probably from your typical guest. I view the tools of the trade. Our job is to certainly be craftspeople on those tools. But at the end of the day, the tools are a means to an end, which is marketing. And we've got to help clients market better. And so I think growing up in a family of advertisers, I still think, you need a really good proposition. That's really important. And we talk to clients about that a lot. You can advertise the hell out of a product, but if it's crappy, it doesn't appeal to consumers, then you're kind of SOL. So I think at the end of the day, we spend a lot of time talking to clients about how we build propositions, because I think at the end of the day, that's really important. That's one piece of the magic. The second piece of the magic is also how you communicate that proposition. And some people call that the creative, but that's only a piece of it. It's really the messaging, the offer. There's a whole bunch of elements to it. And then, of course, how you communicate it. And then lastly is the delivery of it. What I've always thought of is you want to make every dollar count. And some of that is understanding the who, the why. You want to know the size of the opportunity. You want to know when. There's some very basic questions you have to answer. So to me, that's always the higher calling. And so the way this plays out in stuff like ad tech is a good example. Take a product like a TurboTax. I kind of laugh because, a lot of marketers, for example, focus on like a Black Friday or Cyber Monday. In TurboTax land, there's 14 of those kinds of days where there's massive filing days. And so you need tools that can help you do intraday bidding and intra-hour bidding. So the requirements for those kinds of things, when you know the conversion rate is going to change within an hour and it may double or triple, you need to be able to put money into a bidder to go do those things. So the way I've always approached sort of the ad tech world is, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? And what is the tool that solves that problem or that need or that challenge? And so that's where right place, right time is. I think a lot of people seek out, the technical solutions for the sake of the technical solution. We've always tried to find a solution that solves the client need or the customer challenge, right? That's always been my angle on this. A great example of that, by the way, this is another really funny one in the annals of Camelot. So Southwest Airlines was a client at Camelot for 32 years. We had a college marketing program. And as you can imagine, what happened is college newspapers basically, died up at some point because of Facebook. And Southwest, the particular corridor of colleges they were focused on were like Boston, DC, Maryland, and the Northeast corridor that, we were out of a lot of airports there. So Tom tasked me with finding, a digital solution for that. And at the time, Facebook was only in a handful of colleges. And literally the day that he told me, I got a call from a guy who said, hey, there's this guy, Kevin Colleran. He's repping this thing called the Facebook. Would you meet with him? And Kevin Colleran came in the office and literally showed me the back end and the engagement of the Facebook. And I was like, my head sort of blew up. And I was like, we want in. And so we were among the first advertisers in the Facebook. And literally, I can't make this shit up. I mean, it literally happened that way. And then, of course, the first chief revenue officer of Facebook was a guy from Dallas. So we had access early on to all those things, not because we were smart, but we were the right place and like scratching an itch,
So that's interesting about your timing, Sam, and how it relates to, getting on board the Facebook so early on. What are some technologies and solutions in market today that you feel you at PMG should be exploring more deeply and getting a better understanding for your clients?
Well, look, the most exciting one for me, honestly, has been connected TV. And I'll take you back a little bit of history on this. So every summer we would take TurboTax on a tour of things that we think are interesting. And so we went to San Jose where Roku was based. And it was well before any of this stuff was programmatic. And we saw sort of connected TV, and it was still relatively early. Roku had the dongles. And at that time, we all sort of nodded around the table that we thought this would be important. And so we leaned in. And just to put some perspective on it, we were the first right of refusal on Super Bowl on Roku and the first right of refusal on NCAA tournament. When they bought DataZoo, literally the day after the transaction, we had people, in DataZoo's offices sort of connecting the Roku ID to, DataZoo. So at the time, I viewed that as transformational, not only for our agency, but I kind of could see, TV is only going to go one way and it's only going to get more digital. And so I viewed that almost like I saw the early days with, Invite Media and Turn and all those early quote unquote DSPs, Media Math, you name it. Great companies. And so I looked at that, and as connected TV got to be programmatic, that became a massive calling card for us, because as an independent agency and one that doesn't have principled investments in TV, I could finally make the case to these large advertisers, hey, you can take your dollars on linear TV and re-express them through digital video and connected TV and do it not only smarter to get 2-3x more effective reach, but we think we can drive better outcomes because of that effective reach. And so today that's only speeding up. And so we're spending a lot of energy on that. And so as you see sports coming online, there are things we're going to have to solve for, first pod position, second pod position, third pod position in CTV, overlays, all the things you're seeing. And, look, we sponsored the Netflix fight for our client Experian. we did that fight, and you obviously saw some of the challenges with that. I mean, but when you look at live events and streaming, they're not using digital ad insertion yet because it's hard, right? So, those are the kinds of things, like, I think that is, to me, some of the most exciting stuff. And then look, probably the biggest thing that I think people in our industry don't really realize, people are worried about the cookie going away. They should be worrying about IP address because it's gone away and it's about to really go away. And that becomes a bigger issue. And so again, coming back to, thinking about this as a craft, when you do CTV, it's really about the household. It's not about the device or the individual. So there's a lot of things to connect in that world so that we can streamline and scale connected TV advertising. And it's so fragmented, and it's a huge
That's one of the biggest problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the fragmentation is a huge problem. Netflix got a lot of bad press around what happened with the Mike Tyson fight. But, initially I'm like, what the heck is going on? Why is my screen popping up? Is it my internet connection? But the reality is that nobody's really pushed that much live content with that many concurrent users. And for someone who's just entering, it's one thing if you've done this before and this is your 5th or 6th or 7th event. When this is your first event, there's no way to know how your system's going to hold unless it's in a live environment. You could test 5,000 different scenarios, and it could be that 5,001 scenario that causes it to crash. So my view of it is, good job. It worked. People were able to watch, maybe frustrated a little bit. But the second time around, it won't be that way. It will be 10x better.
So it's funny. I have two views. So one is, from our perspective, hugely successful. All the buzz in and around pre and post fight was something for us. And so when you think about Netflix, I mean, it's interesting. Everybody wants Netflix to be Amazon, but Netflix really is more like Disney. They're a very different company. And so the things we look about that is to be part of the storylines. Now, I think there were a couple of things. One is, it probably shouldn't have been a sanctioned fight. I think that was probably setting expectations incorrectly. And the second piece is, like, we knew it was going to be big. We didn't know it was going to be as big as it was. But it was an incredibly effective buy. And it turned out to be incredibly efficient based on the reach and the other things. And so this is the art of where we are right now. The goal is to try to be, I see lots of people that sort of play in the future, 12 months, 24 months, 36 months out. I try to be the master of the present and be as opportunistic as I possibly can right now and take logical leaps of faith on things. And again, timing is a crazy one. I remember I went to a WWE event with Peter Naylor. And by the way, when you grow up in Texas, in the era that I grew up in, wrestling was like part of the culture here. But I had never been to a WWE event, and I'm sort of snobby about it. And I went to the event with him, and I saw all the production around it. And you see what happens. Like, those guys do, by the way, 200 live productions at different venues all year long. I mean, it's an incredible production. But when I walked into the arena, what blew my mind is you realize that it's all about storytelling. And who's great at storytelling? Well, Netflix is great at that. And so at that time, we learned about the fight. And I was like, the Paul Tyson fight is a story. It's less about the fight itself. It's the storylines that are interesting. And you got an old guy fighting, a guy who's not really a boxer, right? Who's now become a boxer.
I was hoping Mike would kick his ass, though, Sam.
Oh, I know. I was hoping the Mike would.
I was like, I hope he wins. I just hope he wins and he can go and just say, that's it. Totally. I'm done.
I know. I was totally in that camp. I wanted Tyson. Look, I remember where I was when Tyson got beat by Buster Douglas. I remember I was on college campus, and it was an incredible moment.
Same. I remember paying for it, the pay-per-view at our house. We would invite our friends over and cousins over, and I was younger. And I remember one of the fights, and I can't remember. I wish I could. It ended in the first round, and it was like 40 seconds. And I remember my dad walking back in going, wait, I just paid how much for this fight, and it's over already? I don't know, like under a minute or a minute and a half fight where he knocked out the other guy. And we're like, okay, well, we're all here. We might as well eat and barbecue and hang out.
Totally.
But he's an incredible fighter. He's a legend.
But look, I mean, that's the piece when we start talking about where this industry is going. Think about all the passion points streaming enables so much of that. And today we think about it as football, but I think there's going to be so much stuff. I mean, for you, it might be pickleball. It doesn't have to be football, or it could be Premier League. Like, I'm a huge soccer fan, and Peacock has literally changed my life. And by the way, we get more European soccer here than they do in the UK. So I can go on and I can be a fan of that. And I can either watch a whole game, or I can go on and watch the key plays. And in 10 minutes, I've effectively watched the game. Or if I want it in Spanish, I can click the Spanish button. When you think about this connected TV opportunity is doing, it's crazy. And I think that's the piece of this that's so much fun. And trying to suss out the context and all the meta elements that we can now get out of digital video and the digital stream, that's going to be fascinating to watch. And like, those are all the things, like, I'm just sort of pulling on threads of things that I think are interesting. So your original question was, I grew up in the advertising business. It was very helpful. Look, I stand on the shoulders of both my father and my grandfather. I make no bones about that. I'm probably born with a silver spoon, but people that work with me would tell you that that's not really the card that I play. But when you grow up in the business, you think about this, and that's the fun of advertising and media. This business is really fun and interesting, and it is never dull. It's always changing.
No, it's never dull.
And it's a fashion business.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the way even consumption has changed, mentioned, pay-per-view, watching a fight, there was no option to watch it on my laptop or let alone my smartphone, because it wasn't even around. And you look at it now, and it's like the consumption of content, whether it's long form, short form, small clips, highlights, and then watching those highlights on your TV, on your phone, on your laptop, it's insane. And so like being able to target the audience, who you're targeting, where you're targeting them, and when varies so much, and following that user journey is so incredibly powerful for a brand. And we didn't have those capabilities in the past. It really was like, I want to buy this prime spot for this fight for X amount of dollars. And that was it. Here's your newspaper. Here's your magazine clipping. And that was basically how you targeted your users. Now it's just across the board, sitting in the back of an Uber, watching a digital out of home screen.
That's right. And then the other thing on this, if you think about it, like the Manning cast to me is very inspirational, because you realize that suddenly there might be multiple flavors of a broadcast too. And different audiences want to consume it different ways. And so there are, potentially going to be infinite choices in some way, shape, or form. And then our job as marketers is to figure out how to connect to those passion points. And that, to me, that's the fun of this. And it's only going to get more interesting. And, once things are digital, there's a lot of opportunities to go do really interesting things.
You mentioned, touch points for users. You mentioned earlier about the IP, and privacy is a big topic across the board, and it has been for years, and it's constantly changing. How do you think the role of privacy is playing in the industry? How do you think that's going to change the way we advertise in the digital space overall?
Well, I'll tell you that, there were three things that we thought about when we were sort of going through the process to sell our agency. And one of the things that really, the first one was privacy and regulation. I thought about a lot because, to be honest with you, I don't really know how all that's going to play out. But I think the first hat I want to put on to answer that question is a consumer, because I think as a consumer, I value my privacy. And I try to use that to think about it the way I want to do this as a marketer, right? So I think the first piece is, look, it's going to be privacy's, regulation is going to be very balkanized for certain. You're going to see states, regulate things differently, versus national regulations. And so it's going to be very, very confusing. And then when you start to think about the various industries, whether it's healthcare or financial services, it's a myriad of stuff. So there is going to be, a massive amount of tech around helping marketers and advertisers managing privacy effectively. What I would sort of say to you is I think it's going to go back to kind of like direct mail kind of things, where the address, the physical address, and that's essentially it. And by the way, I think that's okay. And that's relating really more to the household kind of advertising. Device stuff will be interesting. I mean, look, if you're a walled garden, you have kind of first world issues as it relates to data and things along those lines. Now, I think what you're going to see because of IP address, because of cookie deprecation, and a whole bunch of hold things, I think you're going to see a bunch of companies mowed down over the next 12 to 18 months because they just won't have durable IDs to be able to do things off of. And I think they'll cease being effective, in my opinion. And so the winners will be those folks that have a relationship with the consumer at the end of the day. And I've always believed that.
So there's two things on my end. So one is losing those signals is going to be hard. But the second is I hope it brings back the rise of like creative. So I think targeting will be maybe a little bit more limited unless you live in this walled garden world and you have all the signals and all the info that they've opted into and provide to you to log in and use their service. And I'm hoping that this is the rise of better creative. And I think that that's going to spur a whole new world of ad tech solutions, not just, AI generated kind of content and optimization, but I think people are going to get back to how do we really drive user attention with just really damn good creative. Like we can't half it anymore. It's time to get really creative with how we serve these ads because we need to capture them and we need to capture them at that moment.
Well, I'll tell you, you're hitting on a topic that it's near and dear to my heart right now. One of the things I'm really excited about, I don't know how familiar you are with Mobian, which is Jonah Goodhart's new startup. They are using AI to help suss out, genre, suitability, emotion, tone. And so, we've never really known why our ads are successful or why they're not successful, right? And emotion is as good a place to start as anything. And the AI is very good at context, right? So to your point, can I build certain kinds of creatives for certain kinds of emotions and connect those things? That's a really interesting opportunity. And to be able to do that across both walled gardens and non-walled gardens, I think is a really interesting and aspirational idea. And so we're sort of pulling on that thread right now. But I agree with your sentiment 100%, which is I think I'd love to see, creative is definitely going to make a comeback for certain. And the other thing is it's going to be far more integrated to media than it's ever been. The media is not just simply going to be an empty vessel.
One of the things that I found and discovered within myself the last couple of years is that I really like creative and emotion plays a role. I think I've posted about that in the past where I say, I listen to a song or a video and I put my headphones on and it's on full blast. And I know people walk by my office that I go to and I know they look at me all weird, but I'm usually like nodding my head, listening like, okay, does this make me feel happy? Does this make me feel sentimental? Okay, great. How can I do with my limited technical capabilities and creative capabilities, come up with something that I feel will resonate and like deliver the message? So I'm a huge supporter of like creative and impact. And so I'm hoping that, we do start to see this, rise and evolution of better creative for even just the TV set and making those better and more interactive.
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the areas I'm going, first of all, I couldn't agree with you more. And one of the areas I'm going down the path of is now, you can build creative and test it well before you run it. Right. And I think one of the things is I actually think we need to re-examine the creative process as a whole, because, there was a time in a day where you could take 6 months to build your 30-second ad. You can go do that quickly and test some ideas quickly. And I think at least start to figure out, what doesn't work, which has always been sort of a big philosophy for me. And you're not looking for what works. You're actually looking for what doesn't work and be able to eliminate it completely from the thing. But, I agree with you. And I think the tools to be able to do that, you can do that at light speed now. And to your point, look, the thing I worry about and, in the business that I'm in, and I think every marketer is that there's going to be 2 guys or 2 gals in a garage that are way better at this shit than I am. And they're going to have all the tools at their fingertips and they're going to be way better at it. And they're going to be way more in tune with not only how to create the creative, but like where that belongs and a way to go do that. And I think we're a victim of the legacy processes and the legacy, thinking around how to do creative development and all that sort of stuff. And I think if you're, look at you, look at creators. Creators have sort of flipped that on its head. And so then it's sort of like, okay, if they could do it, brands could do that.
Right. And I think that's the thing. I think the creative process is very different when you're sitting in a boardroom trying to decide than when it's someone just being their
authentic self.
Their authentic self. And I think that is where the creator economy is booming, is you either like them or you don't. And if you don't, that's okay, because somebody else will. And so it's almost like, hey, I'm going to create it for myself or for my client, and I'm going to run with it. And it's really created this new economy that didn't exist many years ago. And as much as I hate to call myself a creator, I've realized that that's what we've become. We are content creators 100%. And we are creating it across, audio, video, newsletters, etc. And there's an appetite for it in our industry that nobody has really tapped before. And that's why I think we're doing so well.
But what a creator is it's a brand that has personification. And that's what you are. I mean, you're a brand and you're personified, and then your voice and your tonality, everything that you do comes, authentically, should authentically relate to that. And I actually think that's actually one of the challenges for brands today. I mean, that's one of the creative problems we've got now. What the bounds are that you can play in when you're a brand.
Sam, that actually brings us to the end of the podcast. Thank you again. And I really do wish you a great 2025. I wish you guys much success at PMG.
Thank you very much. And keep doing what you're doing. You are like the coffee for our industry. You keep it caffeinated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the AdTech God Pod, a podcast for the people, about the people. Stay connected with me for more insights, trends, and interviews in the realm of AdTech. Don't miss out on the latest updates, so follow me on X, Instagram, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't forget, ATG Slack community has insights, networking opportunities, and jobs. Keep the conversation going and stay at the forefront of AdTech innovation.